two of our most cherished values are love and individuality, both absolutely necessary. Who on earth does not need love? Love is like what water is to a flower, necessary for our existence, for our survival, but beyond that, for us to thrive, to grow. The love we get even when we're a fetus in our mother's womb, completely submerged in the embryonic fluids, nurtured, protected, taken care of. When we're born, the nurturing and validation and support that we get from our immediate family, our parents, siblings, extended family, and throughout life. Love is perhaps the most important thing of all. As adults, we need that love, the companionship, intimacy, the support, the recognition that you have dignity, you have value. Individuality is yet another critical need in life. To be yourself, not to be stepped on, not to be abused, not to be compromised or violated, but be able to find your own inner voice. So when you think about it, these both critical needs can seem to collide with one another. Do they work? Because individuality by definition means thinking about your own needs. What do I need? What is my voice, my expression? It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to step on others, but the primary focus is the individual, not the collective, not the other. Love, on the other hand, a healthy love would seem to suggest it's loving another person, meaning foregoing at times your own convenience, your own needs for another. The sensitivity, the empathy, getting out of your own space and allowing another into your space. Being there for someone. When you love someone, even though it may be inconvenient to stay up at night when they're not feeling well, because you need to go to work, the individual side to you would say, hey, I need to take care of myself first. The love side would say, there's someone I care about. More important than my immediate comforts or needs. So when you think of it that way, they seem to be absolute contradictions. Not at all times, but in many fundamental ways. Let's broaden the picture from the individual, from the microcosm to the macrocosm, meaning to the collective. I mean, all battles, wars, conflict, discord of all sorts, in a sense, was this conflict, where the individual needs of a nation, they felt that another nation was encroaching upon them, legitimately or not, which really means was the opposite of love. Instead of love dictating that we all have to find a common denominator and find a way to coexist, to give and take, one attacks the other in the name of their individual needs. When I say individual, the individual of that nationality, of that nation, of that empire, that country. So in truth is when you think about all battles in the world, whether it's within families or communities, or, as I said, countries and empires, it all comes down to that imbalance or difficulty, we could say, the tension between individual needs and the collective good. Now, this is a topic that's addressed by philosophers and thinkers and economists. And I mean, it's one of the most prevalent topics because it's really the essence of government. When the founding fathers and the United States on its currency writes, e pluribus unum, which means from the many one, in a way this was part of the battle, part of the difficulty. How do you deal with that? Many different interests. United States, every state has its own particular strengths and interests, and at the same time you are United States. And the conflict arises time and again. Not fully resolved, but you see it can work. When you look around, look into nature, look into our very human body, for my flesh I behold, you see similar. A healthy body is both individual and also symbiotic. Meaning each individual organ and limb and cell does its job, but they all work together as if there's an invisible conductor that's synchronizing, that's harmonizing between them all. So we see from that there is the ability to join the two. The question is, what is the formula? And how can we apply that? How can that spill over to individuals? You can say when it comes to music, so there the musicians of the symphony, of the orchestra, come together with that in mind, that they're going to work together. And there's a conductor that they comply with, the conductor that they answer to. The same thing, a commander-in-chief of a military has many different military people under his command, but he's the coordinator of it all. How can we take that formula that brings together both the individual and at the same time create a deep love? That is the question. So let's just go through the different schools of thought. The reason throughout history that essentially single dictators, for good or for bad, when I say dictators, meaning could be a benevolent dictator or despot or totalitarian, but it could be a non-benevolent one. The reason that made sense to many was because people have different opinions. If everybody states their opinion, and you don't have one authority that's more powerful than them all, you'll have anarchy. And thus, the prevalent system was one person is in power. Now we all know the abuse and the destruction that brought about. But it seemed for many the only way to go. Or you can say that individual inherited the power and basically the people were subjugated like slaves. On the other hand, if you have the individual reigning, the question is, how do you make sure there's a common good? Which was always the argument, in a sense, of the communists or the Marxists or those that argued for totalitarian regimes. You need to have one authority. But we see what that authorities like that have done. You have the Hitlers, the Stalins, just in the last century. Not to mention all those throughout history. It is the United States, actually, that I mentioned, that was the first to institutionalize and formalize a government that would have the combination of both. It would not have a king with absolute power. You'd have presidents that were elected by the people, for the people, and accountable. You'd have different branches of government, executive, legislative, and judiciary. And that would be the checks and balances necessary to keep the balance. You have a Senate that's represented equally by all states, 2 senators to each state, but then you have a House of Representatives represented by population, meaning for every certain amount of population, 1 million people, you have 1 representative. So California has the largest population, it will have the most representatives. And these 2 houses of Congress need to work again with each other. Is it easier or simpler if you just had one authority who just said everything? Yes, but we know the element of abuse and all the other downsides. So it's a tenuous balance, and it continues to be a battle, as you see, the different parties battle, and they don't all have necessarily good intentions. So philosophically speaking, these 2 ways of thinking was also similar to the difference between capitalism and socialism. With capitalism focusing on the individual wealth, the driving force is greed. Yes, profit. However, with certain checks and balances so people don't abuse each other. Marx and Marxism and then socialism, communism, all the different variations argued, no, there's too much abuse in this capitalist state. Because there you will have those that have and those that have not. The alienation, as Marx put it, the dissonance between employer and employee, the alienation between employee and the work that they create, employee to employee, and therefore the need to eliminate private property, privatization. It should all belong to the communal good, to the communal chest. The problem was, who's going to look at that communal chest? Who's going to be the gatekeeper? Again, you're dealing with individuals. And then the abuse of individuals in communism was far worse than the abuse in capitalism. And the transition from a world where there's individual and private property to a communist world, who's going to oversee that? Well, we look now, theoretically, that's why it was so attractive to some, because it was a utopian vision that was declaring that everybody works and it goes into one collective pot, and then you give each one according to the need. But firstly, with human nature, it eliminated a certain element of drive and competition, which does have a downside, but also has a big upside. It's the driving force. Why should people, if everything I earn is going to the equal pot with everyone else, what would drive me to succeed? It would have to be something noble or selfless. And then, of course, the abuse of individual power. So we see it may have been theoretical, nice utopian vision, but it wasn't viable, didn't work. Yet, the fact of the matter is that socialism did affect capitalism. A lot of raw capitalism almost doesn't exist. Socialism did affect the labor unions, the rights of workers, worker compensation. So again, it's tenuous, but we found some balances. But the argument remains, which one is it? Which one takes priority when you have to battle between the individual and the collective, between individuality and love? Take, for example, the arguments that crop up from time to time in cities or states, different counties. The argument of freedom of speech, of course, freedom of expression, which is a fundamental freedom in the Constitution of the United States. At the same time, the offensiveness that some freedom of speech can cause to others, saying certain things that are offensive. Pornography, other things that offend others. And we know that the wars that have been fought over it, and even those that are against certain offensive things, they say, but freedom of speech can't be compromised. So individuality often trumps even being offended. Not to cause harm to someone, not to call for violence, but the idea to express yourself, you can express yourself. Because if you limit any expression, then you get back to the problem, who determines what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. So these, again, have been battles that have been fought, but it all goes under the rubric of this finding balance between the two. So my own humble research and looking into it, the only real answer I found that I think is a formula that can work is you have to introduce something that's beyond those two. It's like the rule in science. When there are two forces that conflict with each other, you either don't bring them together, or you bring them together and know there will always be constant tension and battle, and perhaps you could harness that as well. Or you have to find a third dimension that in some way equalizes them, or you could say transcends both of them and helps them merge into a greater whole. So what is that third elusive element? So I will cite from language from Kabbalistic and Hasidic terminology, a concept that I've shared many times. It's called bittul. It's a Hebrew word. B-I-T-T-U-L would be the English transliteration. What does it mean? It's a combination of modesty, humility, but above all, suspension of self in form of the dedication to something greater than yourself. When I listen to you, you listen to me, we're exercising that bittul. Instead of me telling you my opinion, instead of me dominating with my preconceived notions, I'm listening to you, which means I put myself aside. I'm not compromising my individuality. Part of my individuality wants to grow. So I want to hear another opinion. I want to expand and broaden my horizons. So I listen. In the process of listening, I'm suspending myself, meaning my understanding of things, my feelings, to be able to see another perspective. I may disagree with that perspective, or I may learn from it, or I may come to a third perspective that is not yours and not mine, but broadens the whole picture. We may both come to that. Many of us are just not capable of doing that, not because we're not capable, because we've not been trained to do so. So much of the polarization we see today, the canceling, the character assassination, the complete dismissal, the personalization of arguments is a perfect example of not exercising bittul. Bittul does not mean that you're foregoing your opinion. It means you're able to listen to another, and you don't have to be wrong for me to be right. And more importantly, even if I think you're wrong, you're entitled to your opinion. But once you turn it into that you're evil and I'm good because my opinion is the only one that dominates, or I don't even want to hear another opinion, even worse, then you're talking about a lack of bittul. So the ultimate solution, and I would say a millennia-old solution that goes back thousands of years to the balance between the individual and love, you could say the collective good, the good of another, is going to a third place. And that place is beyond both individual and the other. It's beyond you and I. I'll just take an example from a Jewish wedding ceremony. You know, the ultimate symbol of love, the ultimate, you can say, manifestation, personification of love is marriage. So during marriage, in a wedding, simple Jewish wedding ceremony, we know there's a chuppah. Chuppah is a canopy, where both bride and groom stand under the canopy. The canopy, in the language of the Kabbalah, is called makif. It's a transcendent force that's above both of them. It's more than this. It's not just the sum of the parts. It's not even beyond the sum of the parts. It's completely beyond both of them. And they both stand under that. So that does not diminish them. It does not annihilate their individuality. It says there's something greater than you and I, that third invisible partner. And we both submit to it, lovingly. And in the process, our individuality gets stronger and our love gets stronger. That's the paradox. So if you pit love and individual against each other, so you'll say, you know what, in the name of love, I forego my individual needs. No. So it's not so convenient for me to do something to help someone I love and care about. But that's called a compromise. In the name of this third, we'll call it X factor, this third transcendent factor, no, because you're both one, you're not compromising. If you're helping another, it's like helping yourself. So it's actually your individuality gets greater, not weaker. The problem is when we have a myopic view of individuality, which is what? Me, me, me. I mean, you see today the epidemic of single life. I take care of myself first. And you see as the years roll on and a person lives a single life and never really has a partner, a true partner in life, it gets more and more difficult. At some point, people trying to get married in their 40s, not saying it's not possible, but it's more difficult. You now have your cupboard, you have your medicine cabinet in place, you have your bank accounts, you have your structure in place. It's very hard to fit someone else into your structure. I remember a friend, he was a student of mine. He was seeking to get married, but he was already in his mid-30s. When I say already, I remember, again, it's always possible. And I remember once coming to see him. I stayed in his home for overnight. I had to be there for the night. And I stayed there. And I walked, he says, come upstairs. I come up and he's sitting he's lying in his beautiful bed, king-size bed, with all his pillows and cushions and suede and cashmere. I mean, you name it. With his big TV, and I mean, with all I called them teddy bears around him, I started laughing, and I said to him, "You're never going to get married." He says, why do you say that? I said, "You have no room for anyone. Your bed is completely filled with all your toys." Now, obviously, he can make room. I meant it also figuratively. You have no room for yourself. I think I've mentioned this in the past. A little girl saw her pregnant mother and said to her, Mommy, how do you have room inside yourself for another person? And I remember when I heard that, I thought to myself, most men don't even have room for people outside of themselves, let alone within themselves. All this is bittul. And the recognition that it's not compromising myself. It's opening me up to something greater. You stand in awe, or you're mesmerized, you're captivated by a sight, or by a beautiful song, and you lose yourself in it. It's not losing yourself as in losing and annihilating and eliminating your individuality. No, not at all. What it is an experience that allows you to broaden your horizons, allows you to experience something much deeper and much greater. So with that in mind, when you think of it that way, it's not that there are two forces, okay, we have to figure out how to negotiate. It's actually an understanding that love and individuality are both connected to something greater. And part of love is that you should be an individual, one individual, another individual, and then they come together, they melt together, because they know how to go beyond their own parameters and recognize that part of love is not always getting what you want, it's also giving to another. It's also part of yourself. It's also an extension, but not an extension of yourself as the other person is another extension, an addendum, a accessory to you. As many people look at love, they say, yeah, love is ultimately selfish. The selfish gene loves. Part of it is because it's good for me to be loving, because when I give, it makes me greater. It's better for my life. We're going far beyond that. We're coming to realize that there's something beyond the very concept of individuality. And that ultimate individuality is actually learning to love another person. And ultimate love is respecting the individuality of another. The Kotzker Rebbe, Rabbi Nachum Mendel of Kotzk, said one of his famous statements that today has become more popular. He said, if I am I because you are you, and you are you because I am not and you are not. But if I am I because I am I, and you are you because you are you, I am and you are. Simple English. If my identity is defined by juxtaposition to you, in other words, to need to know who I am, I need to know where you are. I mean, it's not being generated from within me, then I'm not really me. I'm just an extension or somewhat being defined by you. I may be different than you, but it's still being defined by you. You're determining how I define myself. And the same thing the other way around. If you do the same, so then you're looking at me, and we're both not. I am not, and you are not. And you find this often, unfortunately, in dysfunctional, abusive relationships, which a child has been abused by a parent. So often we remain in that shadow, and we continue to be a victim. Or the opposite, we run away, and we have to cut off. But even cutting off is still being identified by that person. Instead of running toward them, you're running away from them. But you haven't found your own self. So you're either dependent on them, or you've become so independent, you're not really independent, you're just running away from a burning building. But if I am I because I am I, is generated from within, I discover my own soul, my own voice. And you are you because you are you, then I am and you are. And then you can come together in a true way without one annihilating the other, without one swallowing up the other, without one defining the other. Can we learn from each other? Absolutely. But that's why when we call it soulmates, soulmates means that first you have, I know your own soul, and now you're seeking a soulmate of another that can allow you to transcend yourself and experience another and reach even a higher state of soul experience. That's why we don't marry day one when we're born. Or to put it this way, why biologically it's not made that way, because we do have to spend time discovering ourselves. And in the words of Hillel, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? That's the individuality. But then he continues, if I'm only for myself, what am I? Is this a contradiction? Absolutely not. It begins as self, but not a self that is beginning and end of it all. It's not just about you. The self is necessary for you to exist, but it's not, life is not defined by the self. If I'm only for myself, what am I? I will not be complete. It'll be a musician alone. It'll be one musical note, not working with other musical notes. What music will you have? What beauty can you have? Beauty, music, is always going to be a harmony within diversity. With a focus on the word diversity, harmony within diversity. But you have to have diversity. But that requires building up your own confidence, building up your own self. Unfortunately, we live in a world where many of us have never found ourselves. So what happens is it immediately affects our relationships. We're either trying to find ourselves through the other, or we're eating them up alive, forcing them to control them to be an extension of yourself, because that's the only way you feel secure. That ability to just be you, and at the same time be able to coexist, and more than coexist, embrace another, and embrace the beauty, embrace the mystique even, and not need control, because you're secure in your own self, in your own skin. You feel comfortable in your own skin. That's the ultimate key. Is it doable? Absolutely. And the proof is again in the pudding. You can see there are people who've reached that level. How do you begin? Get to know your soul. Your soul is you. Not your body, your soul. The self of the body, the individuality of the body actually precludes others. You may need them for certain things, so therefore you'll negotiate. But the self of the soul is selfless. That's the interesting, it has a self, it's even more powerful than the self of the body. But it's soul consciousness, a soul self is one that's constantly seeking growth and seeking to connect with others. Not because you need something, but because in the very name of transcendence, the soul is secure enough to be that way. The body is not. Materialism by definition divides, because materialism by definition it gets depleted, is temporary, and can never provide a total security. And whatever you have will ultimately run out. So you're always insecure feeling, do I have enough? The soul's sense of self is endless, is infinite. And therefore it's completely that its sense of self is also infinite. And that's why it has the security to seek out others, not because of a need, but because the need of the soul to grow and to become something greater than itself. And that's only possible when you contain and connect with another. And that, my friends, is the key. So you begin by finding your soul. That's why in the morning, start off with a simple exercise, a simple meditation, prayer, chant called Moda'ani. Thank you for returning my soul to me. It's as simple as that. So you force yourself to focus not on your body. I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm rested, I'll take care of my physical needs. You begin the day by recognizing my soul. Thank you. And you show gratitude. That's humble gratitude for returning my soul to me and renewing my contract in life. Renewing the statement that I am important, that I'm indispensable. So you begin with your soul. That soul, by definition, is going to seek out its soulmate. It's going to seek out kindred spirits. It's going to seek out things that are not about itself, because its soul is driven by giving, by transcendence, by going beyond itself. So unless we become more soulful, I do not see how it's possible that you can really relieve the tension between individuality and love. Which brings us to the ultimate point that love is a spiritual experience. It's not just another physical experience that has sublime nature. It's an actual spiritual experience. It's the concept of spirit dominating over matter, of transcendence being more powerful than survival. That's the soul's experience. That, by definition, is synonymous with love. That's what love is. Not about me. It's about the purpose, the cause, the mission which I have been charged with. So in that sense, love and individuality work very well together, because the same soul mission also dictates that you have particular strengths, particular voice, a particular songs to sing, a particular contribution to make to this world. That then everybody needs your contribution. There's nothing more individual than that. And at the same time, you need their contribution, because together, the cross-pollination and the symbiosis and the synchronicity and harmony is vital for the bigger picture and also for each individual part of it. So that is somewhat of an overview, taking the mystical perspective, the transcendent perspective on love, on individuality, and coming away with a third dimension that's greater than both of them and joins them both together. I am I because I am I, and you are you because you are you. I am and you are. And we then can become one, a greater one. And that always requires an element of that bittul. So introduce bittul into your life. Introduce soul into your life. You do so not just through the meditation in the morning, but also through actions, acts of kindness. Focus on giving. Focus on being gracious and gratitude. And all those values that are so critical to make us into something more than just that human self, taking care of our own needs and survival. Getting beyond the egocentric and a life driven by self-interest, but one driven by mission-centric, by higher purpose. And when we can do so individually, in our own personal lives, and in our family lives, in our community, it spills over. The butterfly effect, the ripple effect, to our cities, to our states, to countries, and we could indeed create a world peace where the diversity of the world is not compromised, but on the contrary, the diversity leads to the harmony, and the harmony leads to the diversity. That's our hope, and that's our prayer, especially in times like this when we have our challenges. But it all begins right here, at your doorstep, in your life. Because if two people can create such harmony, then it's just a matter of scaling it, a matter of replicating it. Then why not 2 million, and why not 2 billion, and why not 8 billion? This has been Simon Jacobson, meaningfullife.com. Please check out all the resources we offer, the life skills, talk about these type of topics and others, really cover the entire spectrum of life. If you enjoyed this, please share with others. Subscribe to our growing YouTube channel and to our other offerings, our emails, as well as please share your feedback, your thoughts, comments, questions, critique, suggestions, and may we indeed be able to use technology to do exactly that cross-pollination of becoming greater than the sum of the parts, because each of us contributes our unique verse, our unique song into this cosmic symphony that we are creating in the unfolding drama of life and destiny. Be well and be blessed. Thank you so much.
This program is brought to you by the Meaningful Life Center. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at meaningfullife.com/donate.